session recordings for HoldCoConf 2022 are brought to you by Axial. Axial is a lower middle market deal sourcing platform. To learn more and to start accessing new deal flow today, head to axial.net.
BHAVIN, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to grab my notes while I do that. What were you thinking when you walked up to the only guy not wearing a suit at a finance conference?
I was wondering why you weren't wearing a suit.
Yeah, okay, good.
And then I've been told many times to not wear suits since then. So
I appreciate that.
I put a t-shirt on today.
I love it, thank you. I want to dive into your resume, your background. Before we get into Green Harvest Capital and what you're working on, just give us a quick 60-second overview on you, your career, kind of how we got here.
Yeah, born in India, grew up in Talmadge, Ohio, went to Akron U, stumbled into real estate as a sophomore in college and started my career there. Learned a lot. Through the 2005 is when I started my first business. 2008 was a great learning experience. Comprehended micro, macro economic conditions, which was a foreign concept to me at the time. Through that, understood basically where Wall Street could affect us small players here in Northeast Ohio. Went back to grad school and then worked on a little bit more of a global business. Started a import-export business to import a product called guar gum from India. And I was Indian, so I thought I would make a go of it. At the time, 80% of the world's supply came from there. And then we started to do something called fracking in this country, and then decided to stop all at the same time. And that is what led me to my current job, which is principal of a private equity firm that focuses on real estate, Class C real estate in Northeast Ohio.
Awesome. So I really want to spend a bunch of time today unpacking kind of your global macro thesis, geopolitics, energy, healthcare. How do we start with these topics and arrive at, I'm going to buy Class C apartments in Shaker Heights using a vertically integrated real estate business and eventually buy manufacturing? Like, that's the punchline. Let's start with the global geopolitics part.
Okay, here's a question for the room. How many people know what LNG is? And, all right, great.
The guys from Texas do.
All right. And who's the largest producer in the world of LNG?
No hands. Oh, we got a guess. Go.
United States of America. So Europe's the largest exporter of liquefied natural gas to Europe last year at about 26% was the United States. In the first 4 months of this year, we have shipped about 50%, 51% of all of Europe and United Kingdom needs for liquefied natural gas. I mean, that's a paradigm shift. That's a shift that's cosmic, right? So as we look at energy and we look at independence, oil is there for a reason, and the primary reason is that we still haven't figured out battery storage. I know we're trying to do EVs, we're trying to do all these different things, yet we still, the best form of energy storage in the world is a barrel of oil. You can put it in a cave for 1,000 years, pull it back out, it has the same miles per gallon as it would today. No other battery source does that, and that's why every country has their reserves in oil barrels. So liquefied natural gas is kind of the bridge fuel between the age of oil and the age of electricity, and we're rapidly going towards it. And then solar and wind and all of the renewable energies, which are amazing and terrific, are great, but you can't really store them. So until we figure out the storage component, liquefied natural gas becomes the way to do that. And the reason why we take natural gas and liquefy it is primarily it compresses it by 600 times of its natural state, and then also it makes it inert, which means we can put it on tankers and export it all over the world. So over the next 5 to 7 years, you will see Russia, Qatar, and the United States as the largest exporters, and Europe and Asia as the largest importers. So
let's keep going with the geopolitics piece.
Yeah.
You want to talk US, China, India, and your big picture view of starting there and working down to energy from maybe global trends in population, work, culture?
Sure. So again, personal perspective, guys, take it with a grain of salt. Where I foresee the Indian economy is that it's in its early stages of growth. And right now they're about $3 to $4 trillion, going up from there a little bit at a time. And the Chinese are around 19, and then we're around 20, 22, somewhere around there. And so the Indians have about 1.3 billion people. 65% of the Indian population is below the age of 35. It's a very young country. There's 360 million Indians between the ages of 18 and 45 with a bachelor's, master's, or a PhD. So it's a very young country that's democratically based, that is looking to consume. You can equate the Indian economy at the same stage as late 70s, early 80s of the Chinese economy.
So let's jump from there to energy, oil, and healthcare.
All right. Energy and oil. So why am I focused on energy and oil, and why do I do business in Northeast Ohio? So there are two major shale plays, Marcellus in Pennsylvania, Utica in Ohio. Again, sorry about the oil and gas education. It's a foundation of our thesis and why we believe in this region. So Marcellus primarily supports dry gas, and the Utica, which is here in Ohio, primarily supports what we call wet gas or natural gas liquids. And a fun fact, around 70% of the population in the United States is in about a 9-hour radius of Ohio. So we're an eastern seaboard nation as much as anything else, and all of the population is here. So the power generation that will occur from natural gas will be predominantly on this side of the country. As we look at that, Ohio comes to fruition and comes to the spotlight because of its reserves in natural gas liquids: ethane, methane, butane, propane, hexane. Ethane gas, one of the components of it, produces something called polyethylene when it's cracked. And we're building these things called cracker plants right now throughout the United States. There's two small ones, one in Scioto and one in Kensington, Ohio, cities we've probably never heard of. And then the largest one in the world is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with that. And then the second largest one is being built right now in Belmont County, Ohio, by a company called PTTGC. And again, these will be juggernauts of polymer production, where a pound of polyethylene 5 to 7 years ago was $1.50 a pound. In the United States, where we get everything plastic that we know of in the world, right? And then the Middle East could do it for about 20 cents a pound. Now we can produce for roughly around 18 cents a pound in the United States, and that's going to exponentially increase.
So in our first conversation, I kept up with you all the way until we jumped from energy to healthcare. Do you want to do the operating room thing with the plastics?
Yeah, so what we don't realize is how prevalent plastics are in our world. Environment being on one side, usability and availability being on one side. Keeping the environmental concerns on one side. 80% of a hospital room is plastic. If you look inside your refrigerator, you will see plastic. Majority of our homes in the future are going to be plastic. Like, it is not a product that's going anywhere. And again, reason, byproduct, right? Barrel of oil, primary component, first 20% is kerosene, next 40% will be diesel, 60% will be gasoline, everything else left is plastic. So every time you pump a gallon of diesel or gas into your vehicle, you have this byproduct. And again, we haven't found, single-use plastics have their place, and it's food, like meats. How do we keep meat fresh or keep it from contaminating something else? In hospitals, we just went through a global pandemic. How many of us wore a plastic mask, right? I mean, every single one of us. And then it's like, well, we couldn't mobilize our global production system to make it plant-based. It's just not possible.
So we start with all that, and we're going to buy an apartment building in Shaker Heights. Make that jump for us now.
Absolutely. So, again, oil and gas industry works in three fields: upstream, midstream, downstream. And upstream is the actual getting the product out of the ground. Midstream is transporting it from point A to point B. Downstream is taking the product that comes out of the ground and doing something with it. And so, as we looked at Northeast Ohio with, again, some goggles on, probably beer, maybe a little bit of scotch, in 14, what we saw was massive job growth on the horizon. Not population growth from a California, Miami standard, but population stabilization. And it was driven by the fact that we had an incredible amounts of old factories. The infrastructure here is world class. And I mean, when you travel the world, you realize, you go to India, they're building factories all over, right? I mean, they're a huge country with a massive population. I travel there often. But the first thing that a factory owner has to do is build a road. Then they have to take power to the factory. Then they have to build a semi-town. And then they can start production. Because the major metros are suffocating, right? I mean, you can't even breathe in some of the large cities in those countries where manufacturing's hub is kind of already mature. Where here, we have a tremendous amount of space. We have the factories that are older. We have the roads. We have water. We have rail. And now we have raw material. So when we looked at multifamily housing in Northeast Ohio, I started out by buying 20, 30 unit assets. And when I did, what I noticed was this dichotomy between cost of construction, average median incomes, and per square foot rents, right? And so at the time, the average median incomes in the state of Ohio were $52,000. 32% should be spent on housing. So the monthly rents on average should be somewhere around $1,100. And in my first asset that I bought in Louisville, Ohio, was $495, 1,100 square foot townhome. And I'm like, why? Why is this even happening? And then so, looking at operations that were antiquated, there's been this stagnation period in our market where, wage growth has never been a thing. Population decline is on the rise. And we're like, well, this trend's going to reverse in the next decade, so let's bet on this. So bought that one in 2014. Since then, we've bought 1,000 units in this market. We're vertically integrated. A lot of technology plays into our ability to operate efficiently. We're about a 28-person company. We have our own construction services business, our property management business. And from 2014 to today, the strides we've made, now the average median income in the state of Ohio is $60,000, aided by the inflation in our economy due to the massive cash injection that took place. The average rents should be $1,500. In Cleveland and the 6 counties around here, the average rents are around $1,000 still. The national average is $2,000. So we still believe there's plenty of room for appreciation in our market. And every day we incorporate technology, Internet of Things to better operate our assets.
So I want to double click on one part of what you said, which was population decline, Ohio stagnating, and yet you have this long view that kind of Ohio future. We see things like the Intel plant in Columbus, your comments around energy, we have a healthcare system here. Sell everybody, to John's joke earlier about Cleveland, sell everybody on Ohio now that you're wearing the Cleveland t-shirt.
Yeah, it's work hard and be nice. It's Cleveland way. Okay, so, we had the largest refinery in the world here at one point. This guy named John D. Rockefeller ran it, right? We invented the world of oil and gas. This part of the world did. And all the transportation, manufacturing, all took place here, right? So if you're going to see the largest revival ever in energy, right, and in this massive pivot occurring, why wouldn't it be on the legacy supply chain that supplied the world for almost 100 years? And that's the argument. The argument is, when the Japanese, the Chinese, the Indians, they look at where the production is going to be, think about it. The United States is quietly supplying 50% of liquefied natural gas to Europe right now. I mean, it's a ridiculous statistic. And as these things occur and the Asian markets kick on, which the Indians absolutely have to, by 25 to 27, India will be one of the largest importers of liquefied natural gas. Because just like the United States, which is ending its reliance on coal by 2025, we as a country bought the last rail cart of coal in 2015. We buy coal on a 10-year hedge, so the last rail cart will roll off in 2025. We will also transition from coal power, which was representing about 60% of the power generation, to about 40% of it being natural gas by 2025. That's where fracking stopped. We didn't have any midstream infrastructure, and the Keystone Pipeline got canceled. So as 2025 gets closer, we'll see the ramp up of the fracking process, and then we'll see us transition from coal to liquefied natural gas. As these things occur, the world will look at us and say, wow, The cheapest and the highest quality raw material is here. A tremendous workforce is here. I mean, listen, $20 an hour for wage isn't astounding for the person making it, but it's transformative when two people make it. Because the average median income in the state of Ohio right now is $60,000. That's two people making $15 an hour. That's the average Ohioan. So next time you look at your tax returns, think about that. That most people don't make money. Now, everybody in the room probably does, but it's not real money, right? We're big in Akron. Akron, Ohio has a Amazon distribution center. It's 2.5 million square feet. It has 5,000 jobs at $15 to $18 an hour. It has 10,000 robots operating.
They're killing our warehouse team. We're well aware.
Yeah, sorry about that. And so they are like kind of the book for Indian manufacturers, Asian manufacturers, European manufacturers to look at America. And with a combination of IoT devices, machine learning, cloud computing, right, automation, manufacturing 4.0 in essence, and a labor force that can be sustained at about $20 an hour, Ohio is a tremendous place to start manufacturing, polymer-based or metals-based.
So a lot of folks are probably familiar with maybe the basics of a real estate investment firm. We buy properties, we add value, we raise money from investors and banks, we eventually rent or sell properties. It's a business model. You've just articulated a very sophisticated, in-depth view on global geopolitics and energy. I'm still hung up on we're going to buy apartments in Shaker. Out of all the things you could do, why start in real estate versus everything else you just touched on? Why aren't you buying pipelines? Why aren't you buying a refinery? Like, why start in real estate?
Well, I mean, a refinery, the small test plants for converting ethane gas to, polyethylene, it's $1 billion buy-in, and the regulation is ridiculous.
We can pass the hat. The room will help you out if you want to get started.
Anybody wants to talk to me about 25 to 2030 in manufacturing, I'm your guy. But that's one barrier, is that this regulation in this country was very prohibitive for entrepreneurship in manufacturing, in energy production, things like that, because of the fact that it was all happening in Asia. And at the time, American policy was we'd rather have 2 to 5 companies competing globally than a lot of competition domestically, which made no sense because of the EPA regulations, right? I mean, there's a stat somewhere, 10% of waterways and rivers in our country you could swim in or eat out of in the late 70s, early 80s when the EPA kind of came to fruition. And, right now, over 99% or 95% of waterways are clear. And again, it's because of, 2 generations or so of environmental policies that prevented production here. Now you take that, I was in India in 2017. I'm from a state called Gujarat, and it's a small state, business friendly. New Delhi's the capital, and I had a meeting in New Delhi to look at some manufacturing facilities over there that they were starting to automate, and they were very excited that they were going to be able to do, with robots what somebody could, with about 1,000 employees with robots, what somebody else could do for 10,000. And be competitive. Well, the guy called me and he's like, hey, you can't come right now. The air quality is really bad. And I'm like, okay, whatever. No biggie. He goes, no, you don't realize. The parts per million, again, it's vague, but it was like 603. Outside of the US Embassy, that was the reading of particles in the air from pollutants, right? And, the World Health Organization says somewhere over 68 is bad for you. So the correlation was 2 packs of cigarettes a day, just to breathe, right? And that was a combination of farmers setting fires to their fields to get it ready, prep for the next season, and coal power plants that are just choking it, and population density, right? 1.3 billion in the size of half of the United States. So again, just kind of giving those statistics, that perspective to show like how good we have it here, and how the Indians now need to basically transition from coal to natural gas quicker than we do here. And as they do that, United States and Australia are their preferred 2 places to buy liquefied natural gas from, over the Russians and the Qataris.
You're still selling me on we should be doing liquid natural gas. Why real estate?
Okay. So back it off
Everybody here can buy an apartment building, but like, why are you buying them?
Okay, so
You're way smarter than me.
Right? No, I'm not. But okay, so here was the thesis. We had 10 years, right? 2025, the pivot to liquefied natural gas was going to occur. So what do you do for 10 years? 2014, right? And so what we did see was population stabilization, rent appreciation. To give you some matrix around my first acquisition versus current acquisitions, the first acquisition was 24 townhouses in Louisville, Ohio, for about $1 million. That was about a little bit around $30,000 an apartment. The cost of construction at the time was $125,000. So I bought it at an 8% capitalization rate at the time. And quickly I was able to appreciate the rents to around $645. Trust me, big deal in Louisville, Ohio. And then, over there now we're doing about $930 in rents. That property that we bought for $900,000, a little bit under $990,000, is now worth closer to $1.7 million. Rents are stabilizing somewhere around $800 with room to appreciate all the way up to $1,500 over a decade or two. It's going to take some time. Secondarily, we have transitioned in acquisition prices from $30,000 an apartment closer to around $60,000 an apartment. So we have doubled what we're paying, yet we're buying between $600 and $900 in rents, and our portfolio stabilizing somewhere between $1,000 and $1,200. With all that said, the stabilized value of our assets is coming in somewhere around $100, because construction cost today is somewhere around $200,000. So we're still half of construction costs. Many of our properties are 30% of replacement cost, if not half. So we saw, my partners and I have two other partners, we saw the ability for us to build sustainable businesses that could scale, that could generate passive income, that could be a platform for future companies. What attracted me to this conference was learning about holding companies. I mean, I have zero idea how to do that, but I really want to learn. Because that's what we want to transition to in the next 10 years, where we see 2 to 3 funds as real estate focused, and then 2 to 3 funds manufacturing or production focused.
So just to make sure everybody caught it, until Bevin buys manufacturing businesses, he's going to buy his time doing real estate by growing net operating income in Class C apartments, value add, real estate sponsorship.
Absolutely.
The rest of us are trying to do that later after we build the businesses. You're going in the other order.
Yeah, and that occurred to me. And I mean, I remember looking at injection molding companies. I'm like, this is going to be great. And I would go talk to these older owners, and majority of them were like older guys that were, I mean, they just looked tough. Like they acted tough. They were tough. And once you got to know them, you realize, like, mother of pearl, these guys just got the snot beat out of them for a generation. Like, American manufacturer was like, I mean, they were like the cockroaches after, like, nuclear fallout, right? Because they had survived everything, like interest rates being 12 to 15%, labor shortages, unionization, offshoring, and they were still in business. And they would all tell me the same thing. Listen, you don't want to do this. Anything that you think is going to happen won't happen. Don't do it, right? And so I, at the time, couldn't get an opportunity to buy. I offered to work for free for people. I remember there's a company called Sarah Plastics in Alliance, Ohio. Bart Suchel runs it. And I would go talk to Bart, and Bart was a great guy. And I'd be like, Bart, I'll work for free. I just want to learn the business. And he'd be like, nope. He goes, do something else. And so I really started real estate because I saw the opportunity for 10 years. I saw it could be scaled. I was good at it. And I saw it as a foundation so that I would have enough cash flow and people would see the ability for us to, one, take capital from them and appreciate it in a meaningful way. Right now, we have about 500 individuals that we talk to on a thematic piece or a quarterly, monthly basis. We have 100 unique investors that are all accredited. We started with friends and family, and we've scaled national with certain individuals. And on our first project in Shaker Heights, we bought 105 apartments for right around, it was $5 million acquisition, $1 million in CapEx. Our project cost was $6 million. We took it from a bridge capital point of view, so we sourced non-recourse debt from a lender called Bancorp out of New York. We raised our capital from all of our limited partners. We refinanced it in 2 years for somewhere around $92,000 an apartment. And we had projected a 22% IRR for investors over 2 years. We delivered a 28.6% IRR, one of the highest for what we do in our market. And we hope to continue that streak here, even in a rising rate environment, because as much as cap rates are moving in the really hot markets that are really on fire, like Miami, LA, New York, we're still extremely, extremely, extremely stable from an affordability point of view, replacement point of view. And as interest rates move, the supply constraint on new development goes up. So
I understand the destination is energy and plastics. The current business model is real estate, and you're building a track record.
Absolutely.
And so I'm one of your early LPs. You do all this great work for me, and you're like, hey, guess what? We know how to renovate apartments, and now I'm going to go buy a natural gas pipeline, and I'm going to say to you, BHAVIN, 28% IRR, things are great. Just don't bother. Keep going.
Yeah.
Why the switch?
Okay, so this is more of a long shot, right? I truly believe in vertical integration. So I look at the future of manufacturing from a residential point of view as more modular. And then there are many companies that are doing it on the coast. Like if you go to California, you go to New York, New Jersey area, you'll find modular construction. And so
tell me I'm 5 years old. What does modular construction mean?
All right, so you got stick built ground up where a bunch of people show up with a lot of wood and they erect a structure and there you go, that's stick built. There's prefab where you kind of take a paneling approach where you can do paneling and then you ship it all and then you kind of put it together. And then there's modular, which means you literally design the whole thing inside of a factory and then you erect it on site. You can do a 10-story tower in a very short amount of time. And again, cost-wise, $200 to $250 a square foot for ground-up stick construction. Modular is 40% of that, $87, $90, right, a square foot. So it's got a dramatic advantage to that. Second, it can be replicated and scaled. So think about it this way. Our water lines in our homes are now PEX, it's plastic. If you look at luxury vinyl plank flooring, that's plastic. If you look at paint, latex paint, right? There's a company called Zelman Steel. They have a company called Z Modular in Texas, and then I'm talking to one of their people to say, come to Ohio, it's going to be great. And again, it's the idea that you need to have your production facilities within about a 150-mile radius of where you're going to put your buildings up, and because of the fact that transportation cost then takes your competitive advantage away of the lower cost of construction. So we look at windows, they're vinyl. Again, 70-80% of a home can be plastic. Now, why can't we vertically integrate so that we have factories in Ohio that produce the windows, that produce the flooring, that produce the wall? We can have a company like Zelman Steel, instead of wood, we make it out of steel. And all the studs inside the home can be steel-based. And so, when the life of that house is over, you can take it back down and repurpose majority of the stuff inside of the home instead of putting it in a landfill, right? So I guess the long term would be, all that. We could build our own fixtures, plumbing supplies, things like that. And also, healthcare, right? Going back to that, we have some world-class healthcare systems in this market. And they will need supply, and why not make it here locally?
You sure it wouldn't just be easier to keep buying the apartments? That sounds like a lot of work.
It is. I mean, apartments are a lot of work. I think most people don't realize, and anybody that wants a tour, let me know. I mean, it takes a lot to operate. I mean, we're vertically integrated. We run our full construction business because we have to, otherwise we can't renovate the units on time. We manage 90-some% occupancy at all times. So as people move out, you have a limited amount of time to get in there and renovate. You have to work with the cities. It's a lot. It's not easy.
So today there is a variety of structures that fund the management company and the various assets. When is the first fund for the future of GHC going to happen?
Yeah, we're still siloed. We raise capital per acquisition. My partners and I, we will go out, identify an asset, We will do all of our due diligence up front. All of that capital is fronted by us, the three of us. And then, anywhere from 30 days to 1 week before the closing, we'll reach out to our LPs and then form the limited partnership capital needed for the deal. At a certain point, there are blind pool funds and things like that we can transition to. I think what's the most important thing in scaling or in developing a business that's sustainable is trust. Trust between yourself and your investors. And I focus on that a lot because, again, we're all going to be wrong about things, but it's the approach that you take around, being right or wrong that's the most important. So we're very thoughtful in the way we communicate in our ideas. We eat our own cooking, so we invest our dollars with every investor dollar, right?
Will the first fund be for more real estate to get off of the deal-by-deal model?
Yeah.
And when will the first non-real estate GHC fund?
2025 is the goal to do the first non-real estate focus. But right now we're 1,000 units and apartments. We're about to launch 1,000 hotel rooms, where we will do about 10 to 15 properties, starting out in Ohio and then looking elsewhere. And then we'll do some mixed use / development, or we'll continue again with multifamily, as long as, again, these parameters are going to drive how much of what we do. One, income, right? So we see 4% appreciation in wages in 23 and 24. We look to see Ohio's median household income closer to 70 by 2025 than to 60. We always want to be 30% of people's income in rents that we're charging. And then, again, the cost of acquisition, right? Cap rates in larger markets are 3%. It's ridiculous to me that people are sourcing capital for those kinds of deals where we are still 6 to 8%, which is very reasonable.
I've got two quick things I want to wrap up with, then we'll open it for a few minutes of questions. If you had to guess the first non-real estate asset that GHC would acquire, just theoretically, what might it look like? And just hypothesize, what would that be?
This is a complete guess. In October of this year, I'll be in Dusseldorf. There's a show called the K Show. It's the largest plastics convention show in the world that happens annually.
That sounds so exciting. I would just love to go there.
180,000 people from all around the world show up, and I go part of the Akron delegation. The city of Akron, again, we're very bullish on Akron, and Akron, Ohio, is the polymer capital of the world. #1 university in the world for polymer science. Go Zips. Is there, and then we're the rubber city. Firestone, Goodyear, right? All of those wonderful companies were founded there, and so when I go there, it is absolutely astounding the robotics taking place to make and produce materials, and the connectivity around 5G and robotics that's taking place. So I would say something in injection molding. I would say something with the healthcare sector / home remodeling sector. Vinyl planks to windows to, oxygen masks, something like that.
I just really hope in a couple of years somebody in this room is bidding against you on that so I can watch. Last question for me. I think it's kind of timely in the big picture macro cycle. Some of the stuff Ray Dalio was talking about, other kind of geopolitics stuff of China, Taiwan, semiconductor issues, U.S., money printing, interest rates, and then your views on the Indian population move. I want to just talk for a moment about super macro, any thoughts that you want to share, maybe hot takes on the world at large when it comes to geopolitics?
Yeah, inflation is real. Some statistics, I think, for perspective, is there's still so much capital in private equity in this country. I think one of the statistics that kind of took me by surprise was, it was $3 trillion was earlier this year, was how much cash private equity in this country had. And the entire GDP of United Kingdom is 2.75 trillion. The Queen, the Crown, the whole thing, right? It's ridiculous how much cash is sitting on the sidelines. So, from my perspective, I think, the next superpower, the next rise of a great empire is in China. I think it's India. I think the Chinese had their chance during the pandemic, and they took massive capital away from their best and brightest, and they had their moment in that, and they chose communism over capitalism in a unified way, and therefore I think that will stunt their growth, and they'll be a powerhouse. They will continue to ramp up their internal production, but I think that the majority of commerce that they thought that they would achieve, I think, is going to stop. While the Indians are going to ramp up, this is their moment in the sun, per se, quote unquote. They have the human capital to do it. And one of the statistics that I'll leave you guys with was, in the late 70s, 70% or 75% of the Chinese population did not live in major metros. Now, 70-some percent does. The Indian population, 70-some percent today, doesn't live in major metros. So the transition from villages to the cities is occurring. I hope the United States provides primarily all of their liquefied natural gas that they need in order to power their country and transition to renewables. But
So long India, long Ohio, long Akron.
that's right.
I love it. We've got just 10 or so minutes for questions. If anybody has them, I will field them and repeat them just for recording purposes. If any brave souls want to ask BHAVIN anything. Go ahead. So thoughts on alternatives to plastic that are more environmentally friendly as it relates to the energy thesis?
Yeah, I think there's a place for it. Again, plastics are a byproduct of oil consumption. Plastics will be a byproduct of liquefied natural gas consumption. When you frack, you're just not getting gas. You're just not getting natural gas. You're getting oil, natural gas, all of it. And again, until if the world could get behind nuclear energy, I think the dynamics could be different, right? If we could all in unison, if a new battery technology is discovered where there's no degradation, once you charge a battery, it can sit on a shelf, even for 1 year or 5 years or 10 years, it would transform it. But until that happens, it's a byproduct which is in abundance with the production of liquefied natural gas or natural gas. So I think there's a place for all of it, but not at mass adaptation.
Good. So let's revisit the global macro with the rare earth element.
Yeah,
Elon needs the minerals for the batteries.
Yeah, again, not very well versed in that. I do realize that the Chinese have a lot of it, but I remember the crazy thing with Trump trying to buy, I think it was Iceland, or again, it went back to they have a lot of the rare earth materials. United States is ramping up massive production of it, right? And again, environmental issues blocked them prior, which the last administration really scaled back, which allows them to produce it domestically. I think Intel's decision to have their factory here said a lot, right? They have to source silicon, they have to source rare earth materials, they have to source all of it. And I think one statistic, from a micro standpoint, was 44% of current Intel suppliers are in Northeast Ohio, right? I think we will figure out those supply chains very quickly.
I'll try to capture as much of that as I can for purposes of the recording. So with the trends of remote work and perhaps the decline of population growth in the Midwest, if we're starting with this long India, long LNG thesis, how do we get population growth predicated in Ohio that supports all of that? And how do you balance out these headwinds that we see happening of remote work culture, flight to maybe Texas or Florida, and maybe Gen Z not wanting to be in manufacturing that we'll need to have for everything you believe to play out?
Yeah,
hopefully I captured that.
I'm going to do my best. I mean, that's a lot, right? Again, affordability is something that we think about, right? We're very, very affordable as a region. Climate change is affecting Florida. It's affecting, the hotbed real estate markets. I look at Arizona, and Arizona is incredibly, like Phoenix and Scottsdale. I mean, their real estate market's ridiculous. But by 2030, 54 days will be over 125 degrees, right, in those cities. And it's great to vacation there, but are you going to live there long term? You know, we have a lot of natural resources in this part of the world that are you know, still like water, Great Lakes, things like that. I think that people will see the benefit of that, and the affordability side will drive it. I always talk to cities and say, like, hey, you know, we've got to do a better job of attracting global headquarters here, right? Once we get the companies here, the people will follow. A lot of manufacturers are, you know, automotive manufacturers have gone down to South Carolina and the Carolinas and the Smile States primarily to set up production. If you look at Hyundai, you look at, you know, Mercedes, Volkswagen, they're setting up massive, massive plants down there because, again, labor and weather's one of the components. We can, in Ohio, make an argument for not weather, but great labor, great access, great affordability. Could you repeat the second part of that question?
There's so much swirling through my head, I'm not sure I can.
Okay. You know, Gen Zs, I guess. Just kind of like a, is liquefied natural gas going to be like a stepping stone towards the sustainable future, and therefore there's a time window? 100%. Yeah, again, it's like, I think the best term I've ever heard natural gas used as, it's a bridge fuel, right? It's a bridge fuel between the age of oil and the age of electricity. We're going to invent our way to the future. So if you build a solar plant, if you build a wind power plant, you still need a natural gas pipeline because the sun's not going to shine 24 hours, the wind's not going to blow, right? And energy is consumed on demand base. So like we all go home, we flick a light switch, there's a turbine that powers up somewhere that's powering the light switch. Because again, it's transmission, the storage is the killer. So the power company can't produce it at 6 a.m. and then just hang on to it for when we need it, right? The decentralization of the grid. So, you know, the Biden administration just extended a tariff on solar wafers out of China. And the past administration had done that. So now we have 8 years, and hopefully they're forecasting another 4 or 5 years behind that, where American manufacturers can produce solar panels again in this country. And you'll see the adoption of solar across all residential markets, all, you know, commercial markets over the next 5 to 10 years in a massive way. And like 20% of our power generation, I think month or two ago, was from wind in this country for the first time ever, more than nuclear, more than anything else. So I think we're building up renewable. India's building the largest solar plants in the world right now because what they hope to do is to power their plants with natural gas, have the solar capacity, the wind capacity, the renewable side to take care of the rest. In the United States, you know, we're talking to natural gas supply companies, electricity supply companies to say, hey, give you an example. We have 100 apartments in an area. The average consumption for that apartment after we do our LED upgrades, right, to the unit is anywhere from $30 to $50 of electricity consumption. Now, it's costing First Energy at least $1,000 every time they have to send somebody out for anything at all. The transmission cost alone doesn't make sense to have the power in that unit turn on for $30 to $50 a month. I mean, look at your own home bills. I mean, somewhere around $100, right? So think about the truck and that they have to send out. So what we're telling our suppliers is, hey, help us subsidize, and hopefully this is what the federal government will do over the next 5 years, subsidize business owners to get off the grid. Where if you put solar panels on apartment buildings, put battery packs in, where you can support your own house meters and even one day generate enough power to be able to sell it back to your tenants, hey, that's a revenue stream. Who's not going to want to do that? It's green. So I think like solutions like that are definitely on the horizon.
We got time for like maybe 2 more. Tony's a capitalist like me. We hear the returns and we're like, why on earth would you go beat your head against the wall with manufacturing? The apartments sound great.
Yeah, no, they are great. We're in the early stages of it, right? We had a thesis. We said, hey, we wanted to build about a $100 million business, about 1,000 to 1,200 units. And we've done that, right? So then you have to step back. My partner in New York, you know, he works on Wall Street, very, very bright financial mind, right? And he always talks about diversification. Asset allocation would be the word he throws at me every day. Rehydrating the portfolio, all these horrible terms that I just like get me fired up. And again, I think it's It's about eggs in one basket. It's about the notion of how much can you manage? So right now, for every 100 apartments, you need one person in the office, one person in the field, right? So we need, for every 1,000 apartments, we need 20 employees. We have 28. If we go to 2,000 apartments, how many employees do we need? How do we manage those logistics? At any given time, we're renovating approximately 30 to 50 units of apartments every month. We're doing that. We're managing about a $15 million renovation schedule for the year. There's a lot of moving parts to that equation, right? Somebody leaves, the property manager goes in, tells the project's got, consultants coming in, and you're doing that day to day in the micro. So you can only do so much of that before you're like, okay, at what point is that scale, retroactive where you take a lull? Because again, we can do it, but how much? How many hours in a day?
You're going to get bored and want a new challenge.
Not really. It's still exciting. I mean, it gets the blood going, but it's part of the thesis. We'll see. We evaluate every quarter, right? We have our stand up every evening, and then every quarter we look at it and we go, all right, is the underlying thesis still there? Are we 30% of median household incomes in the markets that we're operating? Check. Are we still operating where we're getting cost compression occurring? Check, right? All of those things. And we run a 10-year bull bear base model, and then we do budgeting so that, we'll look at years. We're lucky, so lucky, that we had inflation.
So the transition from real estate to operating businesses and dedicated funds, what is your go-to-market going to be to differentiate against the dozens of private equity funds and or maybe holding companies here that want to raise money and do the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. We did something very counterintuitive. So when we raise capital, we don't do a typical waterfall syndication, right? We do a GPLP structure. We only sell about 20% of our equity. And we raise 80% of our capital. I know it's counterintuitive, but here's the math. So when we raise capital, we'll give a preferred return of about 8% semi-annually. And then it'll be a 2, 4, or a 5-year hold, depending on the size of the asset and our ability to, 1, renovate, and 2, rent appreciate without displacing people. We are from here. We believe in community. So if somebody's lived in an apartment for 20, 30 years, we don't go to them and say, hey, listen, I know your rent's $600, but market rents are $1,200, so next month your rent's going to be $1,200. We don't do that. We'll appreciate rents between 4 and 5% for existing tenants, but in our workforce housing space, we see about a 30% turnover on an annualized basis, giving us the ability to hit 80 to 90% of the asset over a 2 to 3 year period. So therefore, we can say, all right, we're buying this business. We see the top line increasing by 10 to 20% on an annualized basis between our renovation and operational efficiency. We'll look at operating expenses compress by about 20%. And that's implementing a property management system, giving tenants ability to play, online. Our thesis on water conservation and our energy conservation really helps us compress those utility and water bills. And then so we see a better NOI. With our preferred, when we go to the third year of the asset, we will recapitalize it by going to the permanent market. Again, we're buying for about $50,000 an apartment. We look at it at a 6% capitalization rate in 3 years. With our value add strategy, we're looking at about $100,000 in value. And then the lenders will give us about 70, 80% of that. The blended of the preferred, which we call the pulse of the deal, and the refinance proceeds are what deliver that 20-some% IRR to our investors. Right now, we're about 15%, and that's driven primarily by higher interest rates and cost of acquisition. So I think what will differentiate us is we have about 100 unique investors right now that invest with us that we hope will continue to invest with us over our lifetime. I look to grow that to about 300 to 500 eventually that will invest. And again, they're giving us capital for very small slivers of equity in the deal, but a fair market return, a healthy return that they can find in other syndications and things like that. So what I hope to do is to layer our capital stack, right? Let's say on a project that we're funding, we would hope that 20 to 30% of it are these limited partners, these friends and family, these individuals that have given us checks of about $100,000 at a time per investment, that will continue to do that with those returns. then a institutional player, family office, 1 or 2, right? And then our debt partners, hopefully, will be about 50%. And then 10% can come from somewhere else, or us as general partners will co-invest. One of the best models that I had heard was, these GPs went to these 4 wealthy investors and said, look, this manufacturing business that we're going to start for 3 years, we're not going to take a paycheck, right? For 3 years, we won't. And whatever that paycheck is going to go in a bank account. The 4th year, we'll take all of that capital and reinvest it into the business, and we'll ask you to match what we invest or double, right? What we invest into it, and the 4th year we'll start taking it. We might go to strategies where we show investors that, look, we're not doing this for a paycheck. We're doing this because we believe in it, and we're here to do this long term. So that's kind of the answer. I don't know if
Ladies and gentlemen, BHAVIN PATEL.